our next speaker is going to be talking to us from a bit of a legal perspective. What is hate crimes? What are online content hate crimes? What is their experience in Canada? Corporal Anthony Statham is a good friend of ours, and he has been a supporter of justice and the law here in British Columbia. He's with the BC RCMP Hate Crimes Division, and he's going to be sharing his presentation with us about this issue. And now, Anthony, please go ahead.
Thanks so much for having me. It's really humbling again to be asked to speak at this event and on behalf of the RCMP. I'm going to put up some slides on the screen here. It's just for the purpose of going over what the law and its current incarnation around hate crime is in Canada.
So you now have co-host authority. Anthony, please feel free to share your slides.
Thanks very much. This is going to be a very brief presentation, everyone. I'm going to start with the definition of hate crime, and it's an informal definition because, in fact, hate crime is that term is not defined in law in Canada. So the best description I can give you that sort of is a description of all of the various laws that we do have is that hate crime is a criminal offense that's committed against a person or property where the motivating factor is hate, prejudice, or bias against an identifiable group. So what's an identifiable group? It's actually defined in 3 different places in our criminal code, but the most complete definition right now is under section 718.2, which defines an identifiable group as any section of the public that's distinguished by race, national or ethnic origin, language, color, religion, sex, age, mental or physical disability, sexual orientation, or gender identity or expression, or on any other similar factor. The other similar factor component was added a few years ago by the federal government to describe groups that aren't yet specified in law. So there are 3 broad categories of hate crime in Canada. There are hate motivated crimes, which are dealt with under something called sentencing principles. There are hate propaganda crimes, and those include willful promotion of hatred, public incitement of hatred, and advocating genocide. And then we also have mischief to property that's religious or educational, or really any type of property that's used primarily by an identifiable group. So the first, my apologies. Just quickly on hate motivated crimes. I mean, those are overwhelmingly the types of, when we talk about hate crime in this country, hate motivated crimes are over 90% of what we're actually describing. And those range from more minor offenses like graffiti to very serious offenses up to and including murder. And the way that the law deals with hate motivated offenses is that all those offenses, whether it be an assault or criminal harassment or uttering threats or mischief, is dealt with the same that anything that isn't motivated by hate is investigated and dealt with in the courts. But then in the event that somebody is found guilty of an offense and convicted of that, the court then has the ability to consider hate as an aggravating factor to the offense and thereby impose an increased sentence. The slide I have up here describes willful promotion of hatred, and this is the offense that we are typically talking about when we use the term hate speech in Canada. And again, in Canada, we don't have anything regulating speech. Under Section 2 of our charter, we're protected, our freedom of expression is protected. So there's no such thing as free speech in Canada, only freedom of expression. And this section, willful promotion of hatred, is always balanced out against Section 2 of the Charter, freedom of expression rights. And everyone who, by communicating statements other than in private conversation, willfully promotes hatred against an identifiable group. There's a proposed amendment to this section of the criminal code. It's quite recent, where the government's proposing to add a definition of hatred under this section of the code. Now, it may come as a surprise, to many Canadians, just in general, the fact that we have this section that deals with promoting hatred, but we haven't actually defined what hatred is. I think that the proposal to do that is a very good thing. It may not seem like a massive development in terms of dealing with the scope of everything that's been talked about here today, but it will equip law enforcement to see more things through to charges in this country, because I think that's part of it. And supporting victims and healing communities are probably the most critical pieces to any of this. But also, law enforcement has to have the ability to use the law effectively. The constitutionality of this section of the criminal code was determined in 1990, and I think we can all agree that we've evolved quite a bit as a society since then. And this needs to be revisited, and an amendment to this section of the code, I believe, will have a positive effect as far as our ability to do something about online hate when something needs to be done. We also have public incitement of hatred under section 319, that should say 319.1 of the criminal code, not 319.2. But everyone who, by communicating statements in any public place, incites hatred against an identifiable group, where the incitement is likely to lead to a breach of the peace. Within the past 5 years in Canada, this section has actually been used in cases of online hate in Quebec, and has been effective. I think that what we'll see is we'll continue to see this section litigated in certain cases too in the online context. We also have advocating genocide under section 318, which includes the definition of genocide, acts committed with the intent to destroy it in whole or in part any identifiable group, that is, killing members of the group or deliberately inflicting conditions calculated to bring about its physical destruction. Again, this can be enforced in the online context. We do have a clear definition of what genocide is. And we've seen some cases recently in the past few years where we've had successful convictions in relation to this offense. And then finally, mischief to property. This doesn't apply necessarily to discussions around online hate, but essentially it's the other piece of law that we have in this country. So any premises or building that's primarily used by an identifiable group, the consideration for hate motivation is built into this piece of law. And so it's an automatic consideration every time. I'm just going to end with sort of an important question, very, very important right now. When is hate crime terrorism? And it's the answer to that at present, and it's going to continue to evolve, is that both hate crimes and terrorism can be committed for ideological reasons. And where significant violent attacks occur, both hate crime laws and terrorism laws may apply. And it's a requirement for the responsible law enforcement agencies to delegate investigation of any applicable criminal offenses. And if we think back to Quebec in 2017 and the questions from the local Muslim community, and then literally Canadians across the country, and then people around the world, was, why has this suspect not been charged with terrorism? It has a terrorizing effect. Surely terrorism should be a consideration here. That suspect wasn't charged with terrorism. In the Christchurch attack, we saw a terrorism charge added to all the murder charges that the suspect there was convicted of. And what we've seen now in the recent attack in London is that a terrorism charge has been has been applied to that suspect. We're in an evolving state, I think, around legally, simply just litigating our terrorism legislation in cases where in the past it might have simply been regarded as a hate crime. Terrorism absolutely is relevant to events like that. It's also relevant to circumstances where there isn't a loss of life. And I think we're going to see that continue to evolve over the next over the years ahead of us, and that it's certainly going to be relevant to online forums as well. And I just want to end by saying that again, it's very, very humbling to be invited to speak at this event. And sort of it's interesting. This is just from a professional standpoint, listening to Heidi and Tony talk right before me. You know, the point that there'd be a lot of value for legislators in this country to look at laws in other countries, for example, Germany, where you have a law that criminalizes Holocaust denial. And in the German context, that makes absolute sense, given the history of that country. In Canada, Holocaust denial isn't criminalized. It would be protected as freedom of expression. I think that we can look at our own country and we can look at examples of how racialized and marginalized groups have been, you know, historically mistreated in this country, and where we have examples of genocide ourselves, and how those considerations are absolutely relevant to how our law needs to evolve. And on behalf of my peers in the RCMP, I'll simply say that we're absolutely committed to seeing justice done for everyone who needs it right now, and for those who didn't receive it in the past. Thank you.